Gibson acoustic guitars are known the world over. Used by famous musicians for decades, the acoustic guitars that Gibson manufactures has graced many stages and burned its way into the psyche of America as what is a quintessential American acoustic guitar. Today, we're going to take a look at each of the body shapes that are available within the acoustic line from Gibson and tell you what you get from each individual body shape. Stick around. Hey, you're watching Alamo Music TV. My name is Chris McKee with Alamo Music Center in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. So today we're going to take a look at Gibson acoustic guitars. Gibson's been making guitars for multiple decades. They are famous the world over, and they've found their way into the hands of a lot of famous musicians. Lots of guitarists lust after particular models from Gibson, like the J45 or the Hummingbird I'm holding in my hand today. The SJ-200, famously played by Elvis, is one of the ones that I personally want to own alongside a J45 and pretty much anything else I can get my hands on. But each of these body shapes brings something to the table. Regardless of the different tone wood combinations that might come on the guitar, the body shape itself helps to mold the sound that's coming out of the guitar as well as the feeling that you have with it in your lap. So today what we want to do is kind of look at all of the body shapes that Gibson currently offers in its lineup, talk about the benefits of each and what you're liable to get out of that guitar from playing it. So let's go through each one, starting from the smallest to the biggest. In Gibson's current lineup, they start with a listing for small body guitars, and there's actually two body shapes in that lineup of small bodies. The first one is the smallest, which is the Parlor guitar. Now, the model that I'm holding right here is the Parlor Rosewood, and it is basically a shrunken down jumbo. It is very reminiscent of the shape that we'll see later in the super jumbo guitar like the SJ-200, but just shrunken down to a really small form factor. Now, they call this a Parlor, but its shape is not like a lot of Parlors that you might see from other manufacturers. It has a very tight, narrow waist and a really kind of diminutive sized body, shrunken down, really like they took the SJ-200 and left it in the dryer too long. Now, the sound that you get out of this is unique because of that shape. So whether you get this with the rosewood back and sides or the mahogany back and sides, the general response that the body gives is some low end that's kind of tuned, and everything tightens up because of this tight waist here. So that's something that you want to pay close attention to regardless of the manufacturer. If you're looking at body shapes, as you bring a waist tighter in, it feels like a smaller guitar because it sits a little lower in your waist. It has this beautiful curvaceous aesthetic to it, but tightening that waist tightens the response that's coming out of the sound hole because of the way that the sound kind of resonates in the body cavity there. Overall, the guitar is extremely comfortable, which can be imagined because of its size and its lack of a lot of depth there. But it has a lot of volume because of the overall dimensions of this lower bout. This guitar is just as wide at the bottom as the next guitar that we're going to see, but you're going to be able to tell that this is a lot shorter. In fact, let me show them side by side just to prove that point. So this is the other guitar in the small body lineup from Gibson Acoustics. This is an L-00. This particular one that I'm holding is the L-00 Standard. And you can see as they rest on my knee how much taller by a few inches the L-00 is compared to the Parlor size guitar. Now, they are about the same depth, and their lower bout is actually the same with the cross. But when you look at the lines of the L-00, the L-00 here, it's a taller guitar, and what that does is it stretches out the lines of the guitar compared to the tighter circle shape that you get from the Parlor guitar. So let's talk about the sound that you're liable to get as well as the feel from the L-00. So small body guitars in general are always nice for light attack and fingerstyle guitar playing because the small size of the top is going to resonate really rapidly without a lot of energy inputted into the guitar, so you get a good bit of volume without having to really play into it. They also tend to be very comfortable to hold because of their small size and allow you to have a little bit more intimate bond with the instrument. Since it responds to a light touch, you can be very dynamic. Now, with this particular body shape from Gibson, the sound that you're going to get out of it is perfect for fingerstyle guitar, but where I find this really excels is kind of rootsy blues type stuff. Part of that's Gibson's general kind of aesthetic to design and their bracing patterns, but the size really allows you to be nuanced with your playing, and the sound that you're going to get out of it is again focused. It's not quite as focused as the Parlor though, so you're going to have a little bit broader sound coming out of that sound hole. Plenty of volume. You can lay into it with a bit of a strum, which we'll show you later on, but overall it's going to be a light touch that really coaxes the sound that you want out of this guitar. So let's move on to some of the bigger bodies where you're going to really get into some of the meat of playing. All right, so this next guitar is a Dreadnought. This is a classic square-shaped Dreadnought from Gibson. Now this happens to be a Hummingbird standard, and it's a very famous guitar that has been going on pretty popular since the 1960s. But this square body shape's been used in Hummingbirds, Doves, the Songwriter series, and it's a pretty standard classic body shape. Now Gibson did not invent this, Martin did, but Gibson quickly took hold of this body shape, added it to their lineup, and it's been used on multiple recordings by multiple artists, again, for decades and decades. The sound of a Dreadnought pretty much across the board is what we could say as boxy, and that is because of its box shape. You have a very wide lower bout, an upper bout that is pretty similar in size to the lower bout, good amount of depth to it, and a very shallow waist. So we talked earlier about how with that Parlor, the tight waist is going to focus the sound. It's going to do that on any kind of jumbo, really. When you have the shallower waist, what it's going to do is allow that to be really open. So you get a lot of just kind of a very full sound with the entirety of a chord that you're playing coming out of the sound hole, rather than the focus sound that allows you to hear articulation of notes. So regardless, again, of the tone woods that are going to be used, you're going to get a lot of volume. You can lay into this guitar, you can really strum it, but you can finger pick it with kind of a medium attack that's going to go on. And that sound's going to be very full, kind of rounded in a sort of way where you're not hearing anything particular, you're just kind of getting a lot of this volume coming out. And when these were originally designed, that was very helpful because there wasn't a lot of amplification and you were competing with other musicians to be heard. So that's the square shoulder Dreadnought, but there's another very famous Dreadnought from Gibson that we should look at and compare. So here I'm holding in my hand a Hummingbird square shoulder Dreadnought and a J45. Now this particular one is a J45 vintage, which is one of my absolute favorite models from Gibson and one of my favorite guitars we have in the store, period. But you can see they're very similar, and yet the lines are different, creating a different feel, different sound from the instrument itself. Now the J45 is, in our current vernacular, a round-shouldered Dreadnought, but that's not what it was originally called. The J in J45 actually stands for jumbo. So from Gibson, this was their jumbo, and it was designed with its bracing and its shape in mind to really be able to push that volume, that sound, and kind of give you a best of both worlds. You can see the lines of the upper bout are reminiscent of the L-00 that we saw, that real roundness to that upper bout versus the squareness that we see on the Hummingbird. That, coupled with the larger lower bout that you see in both Dreadnoughts here, gives you a lot of volume, but it rounds the notes a little bit and actually kind of gives it a different sense of articulation. What's happening in the resonance chamber, which is basically the body of the guitar, differs as the sound waves bounce off the square shoulder of the Hummingbird versus the round shoulder of the J45. And of course, there's just an aesthetic difference as well. You can typically prefer one or the other. I'm a huge fan of both, but if I gotta be honest, the J45 hits the soft spot for me. So that's what you're gonna get out of the J45, this round shoulder Dreadnought or jumbo versus the square shoulder Dreadnought you see in the rest of the line. Now, we'll talk about the big boy. The big guy in Gibson's lineup is, of course, the SJ-200. And if the J45 was a jumbo, then the SJ-200 was, of course, a super jumbo. And it really is super. It's been called the king of flat top guitars, and when Gibson came out with this, it was basically to design a really large acoustic guitar that would give you a ton of volume. Now, a lot of that volume comes from the fact that the mere size, the breadth across here on the top of the guitar at the lower bout is going to move a tremendous amount as you put energy into it through your playing. Now, just like we talked about with small body guitars responding to a light touch, this is not going to respond that well to a light touch given the size, just the real estate of the top. So the SJ-200 is designed for your flat pick. You want to really go onto this thing, and as you dig into it more, it's going to resonate and give you more. Now, again, let's go back to that really tight waist that this has. Given the size of it, this waist is really tight, just like we saw on the Parlor. And what that does is it takes all of that energy that you put into it and it focuses it as it's leaving the sound hole to give you some articulation to go along with the volume. So less of a boxy shape like you get out of a Dreadnought, a little rounder but more articulate is what you're going to get out of the jumbo-shaped guitars. So, I mean, the SJ-200, it really can be the king of flat tops, but you got to put into it. Now, if you're going to try to play fingerstyle guitar on this, you certainly can, but again, it wants you to really kind of lay into it. So you got to have a heavy attack, and then it will reward you in spades for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of put these through their paces musically so you can get an idea of what I've been talking about. Now, all of these guitars are going to sound different for several reasons. One, they're all different body shapes as we've talked about, but two, they're all different tone woods. So you might find a Parlor or a J45 or Hummingbird or Songwriter, which is another square shoulder Dreadnought, L-00 with a different tone wood. Those are going to sound different than the ones we're demoing today, but hopefully you get an idea of the fundamental that the body shapes themselves give you. Now, one other note about the size. With the small body guitars is really obvious, really comfortable, right? As you move up in size, it is a bit more of a guitar to deal with. So keep that in mind as well. If you're 5'4", the SJ-200 is almost as big as you. Just kidding, but you get an idea. So keep that in mind. It's about the tone. It's about what you are trying to accomplish as a musician and what feels comfortable for you so that the guitar can kind of disappear as you're playing it. Hopefully you can hear the differences. Well, there you have it. So these are the current acoustic guitar body shapes that Gibson has in their lineup. Now in the past, they've had other additional body shapes. Sometimes they were standard models, sometimes they were signature models. In the future, they may bring out additional ones as well. But as of now, this is what they currently offer. And the idea here is to give you an idea of the fundamental sound that you're going to get both in the response, the tone, and of course the feel from each of these body shapes. The reason they exist is because they are suited for a particular playing style and a particular person. That might be you. If you have any more questions about any of these guitars or Gibson guitars in general, please reach out to us. We are a Gibson dealer. We love these guitars, and we try to know as much about them so that we can help you find the right guitar to suit your needs. Now, whether you're playing a J45 vintage, an SJ-200, or you just simply aspire to, maybe you've got an Epiphone or whatnot, the best guitar in the world is the one that you're making music on. That's what we want to help you with. So if you're new here, make sure that you subscribe, turn on notifications, like our videos, stick around for more, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks so much for watching. We hope you are enjoying our channel. You might be interested to know that Alamo Music has 2 more YouTube channels. One for piano and keyboard enthusiasts, and the other, our Alamo Music Audio Lab channel that focuses on synthesizers, drum machines, and other things with Chris Klein. So, if you are interested in checking those out, down in the bottom of the description, I have links to both of those channels. We hope to see you there as well.